but we had a little notebook. We kept track of their chores. We gave them payment or wages for their chores. And out of that, as soon as we handed it out, we had these 3 banks. It was a store bank, a bank, and a church bank. And so we taught them to divide a third, a third, a third.
Save, spend, give.
Exactly.
You're listening to the Wisdom for Wealth for Life podcast, brought to you by Blue Trust. In this episode, we have National Managing Director and Senior Private Wealth Advisor of Blue Trust, Kerry Mallory, and Blue Trust clients, Chris and Kim Patton. The Pattons share with us how they learn to give despite their circumstances, and specifically how they teach their children to give. Let's listen in now.
Kim and Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. I am really excited that you could be with us. I've been honored to have a front row seat into what God is doing in your lives over these last several years. And I can't wait for you to be able to share your story with others.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Well, let's start. I'm just going to ask you some questions. So I want to first hear about, Chris, I know that you are the third generation of a multi-generational family business, an auto business. Tell us a little bit more about your family business.
Yeah, so my grandfather started it in South Carolina in 1962. Automobile dealerships at the time, it was Volkswagen. And my dad worked for him for a number of years, then moved to Georgia. And I grew up in it. So I had 2 younger brothers, have 2 younger brothers. And from the time I was, 9, maybe 10 years old, Dad had me out there at least. The younger brothers came along later as they were older. But washing cars, painting curbs, picking weeds, just anything in the business, typically on Saturdays. And then as I was 12, 13, it was through the week in the summers. And so I grew up in the business. Every department I worked in it, I got paid about 10% of what the normal wage was. I think at 14 in the parts department, I was getting $1.50 an hour.
Nice.
Minimum wage
was real money.
Well, no, minimum wage was 4 1/4.
Oh, okay.
And Dad said, you can go get that, but I'm not giving you the experience at that number, right? So just grew up in it and went off to college knowing that's what I wanted to do. Had one job coming out of college as a waiter, just waited tables to make sure I wanted to go back to the car business. And that will make sure that you want to go back, right? So anyway, coming out of college, worked full time, went back to my grandfather's store in South Carolina for 3 years when we first got married, and then took over, I guess it was right around 99, 2000, took over those dealerships in LaGrange.
Okay. So you're a successful CEO. You have all the things that come with being a successful CEO, a title, a car, nice cars, being in the business, big paycheck. You can direct everyone. You've got, by the world standards, you've reached that pinnacle of success, and you made a decision to leave it all behind. Chris, tell us about that.
Well, so I in 99, 2000 is when I took over the stores in LaGrange, and we had about 120 employees representing Honda, Ford, Lincoln, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram. And like you said, I didn't feel like I had, hit the pinnacle, but I was in charge. I had a lot of good perks, did that business for 4 or 5 years. And then I came to realize that this was actually God's business. I started doing a daily quiet time in 2000. Had not done it before that. After that, it changed everything. So it's been 20-something years now of that. And that constant reading of Scripture and trying to figure out how does that apply changed my outlook on the business. So from 03-ish till 17, I ran that company, but from an eternal perspective. So I looked at the business as my platform for ministry. Love on the employees and their family members. Make sure that I'm putting seeds out of the gospel, not beating them over the head with it, no bullhorns or anything like that. And did that for 15 years. And I thought, this is my path, right? I'll never leave the family business. And from now on, that's what I'll be doing. And then God, I guess to put it simply.
And then God.
And then God. I got a call from a mentor who introduced me to my current boss, Peter Freisler in South Carolina. He said, Chris, Peter's got a business in South Carolina running it like you do, but he also started a nonprofit called His Way at Work. So I went from doing ministry in the business I left the business, and God just changed our location from Georgia to South Carolina. We continue doing ministry, but now through a nonprofit that teaches other business owners how to do the same thing. So now, for the last 6 years, we've been doing that in South Carolina. We sold part of the business, sold our house, turned the business over to my little brother, had to give the cars up, and made some pretty dramatic changes to go into a nonprofit world. It's a different financial situation, but the crazy thing is God has blessed that way beyond measure. I mean, the work we're doing in Latin America, even into Europe now and in the U.S. is crazy, but I'm sure we'll get into more of it. But even financially, he's done some things that have been kind of crazy.
We're going to talk more about it, but I have to pause now because I know y'all well, and I know you couldn't do any of those things you were talking about without Kim by your side.
No way.
So Kim, tell us a little bit about yourself and your family.
So we have 3 children. We have a son that's 26, and then we have twin daughters that are 24, and everybody is fully launched on their own.
Praise
so
the Lord for that.
Yes.
Empty nest.
Nobody living in your basement?
Nobody's
Not
living.
that we know.
Okay.
Nobody's living with us, but very proud of them, very excited for where they are. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, through this process of doing all the hard things it took to become the CEO and support Chris through that, and then also making this move to another type of ministry, what's been the hardest part about that transition for you guys?
I would say the hardest part was listening and just knowing in the beginning, knowing that this is what God intended for us. And I know when the decision came, it was a lot of prayer, fasting, and Chris was very clear and he said, let's not talk to anybody. Let's pray about this decision, that this is what we're going to do. And through that, we knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that this move was what we were supposed to do. And then from that, not that that was the hardest, but it was just, you knew at that point that God has us on this path. So as far as hardest part, I would say just leaving the family, leaving my sister and my mom, leaving friends, leaving my career, leaving everything, and moving to South Carolina was quite a leap.
Quite a leap. Yeah, you grew up in a small town. Y'all have been in a small town, LaGrange, and that had to have been really hard.
It was.
And now you're in Spartanburg.
We are.
So those are some of the hard things about the transition. What was easier? What did you find like, wow, looking back, this was so easy to do?
I feel like it's just the fact that we knew. I mean, because we had prayed and had not talked to anyone, and we knew that this was from God, that even though it has been hard, and we left our church, we left everything, and it was hard to plug in and start over fresh, and we didn't have children when we left too. So we didn't realize how, much a soccer field or a church groups and so forth really plug you in. So that was.
So I think what I've heard you say before is the hardest thing was the moving, the change, the whole thing. The easiest thing was knowing that it was God leading.
Yeah.
And therefore the decision was actually easy. When he made it so clear, we didn't struggle, should we or shouldn't we? It was an automatic yes. It's the now what that got hard. But he's also blessed that.
My son's a senior in high school, so we're getting ready to be empty nesters with my daughter already in college. You guys are there. I can't imagine in our empty nesting season doing what you guys have done, uprooting yourselves, moving to a new city. But on the other hand, empty nesting now, I can imagine it's a bit like dating with money.
Yeah.
That's
fun.
Really good example. I mean, a good way to describe it. Our first 3 years of marriage were in South Carolina, away from family. And so we had to come together better. The last 5-6 years away from family, same thing. So it's been great for our marriage.
Together. It's been very good.
Oh, praise the Lord for that.
Yeah.
Well, isn't it amazing how he works through those difficult seasons to refine us? That's wonderful to hear. Well, tell us about how you came to Ronald Blue Trust. Like, what brought you to us?
Yeah, I'll tell you. When we were in the business, probably shortly after taking ownership, my brother and I bought stock from my dad, and had just gotten into that ownership piece. We weren't making huge money. We weren't putting huge money away. most of our investment, if you want to say it, was in the family business, right? That it's all pouring back into or staying in the business. But as things started to shift, I saw a future where there was big income possibilities, and I wanted a game plan. And you and I had bumped into each other, weeks before that happened. So I reached back out to you and said, can you help me come up with a game plan, right? Map out how we need to put money to work for us, how we need to do giving in light of that. Just help me figure that out. And that was great I think we did that for a year or two. Mm-hmm. And then this transition happened where I'm walking away from all of that, giving that up basically to go to this nonprofit world. I called you and said, I don't think we need you anymore, nothing to manage.
Right.
However, a year or so after that, the dust had settled. God started putting some things back in place that we weren't sure were ever coming back. And the need was there again. So I reached back out and said, I need guidance on what to do. I want to be a good steward of what God's given us. How do we manage that the best that we can? Whether it's tactically in investments or theoretically in how do you approach giving and so forth. I just wanted some guidance on that.
Well, I have seen, as the world feels like it's getting more uncertain, how important it is for me and my wife, for you guys to have somebody who's wise counselor speaking into your lives, somebody who's objective, somebody that can bring God's timeless truths into this conversation in the midst of all this uncertainty. There are some things we can count on.
Yeah, and let me add this, Kerry, because as a business owner, I've managed cash flow. I've managed the assets of the business. I don't feel like I'm financially inept. But you've done this with hundreds, if not thousands, of families, and Ron Blue as a whole has done this with so many other business owners and people managing their resources. You ask questions and you do things that we never even thought to ask. I've got a very narrow scope, even though I'm a business owner, and you were able to widen that. And I could see that, hey, you're going to know things to ask that I don't even know to ask.
Well, what are some of the practical ways you guys benefited by having us alongside you on your journey?
Give you an example. In investing, you've got some gains and some losses. And as we start to talk about giving, you make the suggestion, hey, you need to look at some stocks where you've gained and turn around and gift the stocks. Because in my mind, I'm always gifting a check, right? Instead of gifting the stock and taking advantage of maximizing the gift and minimizing the tax burden. Never would have figured that out. And the dollars that added up to in, frankly, enabling us to give more was crazy.
Yeah, I remember asking you guys, how do you do your giving? You're so generous. How do you do your giving? You said, we write checks. I was like, okay, stop writing the checks. We've got something. Do you want to say some taxes?
Exactly.
That's good.
Yeah, that's great. Well, as you think about that idea of generosity, that's something that stood out to me as I've walked beside you, is just watching how generous you've been, and especially how generous you've been in the midst of basically the rug change, your groundwork changing out from underneath you. Talk to me about how you've managed to be so generous, even when life is quite different now than it's been in the past.
Yeah, I'll say this, Kerry. I grew up family taught, to tithe, to be generous, to give, that this is not your money, it's God's money. And theoretically, I understood that, right? Scripture says God owns the world and everything in it. So I understood that's truth. But it wasn't heart understood. I didn't really own that concept. And so we were generous in our first engagement with you. We were giving out of surplus, and we were giving well over and above our tithe. But it was asking the question, how much do we give between the two of us? We read a book right before engaging you the second time when things started to settle down in the nonprofit, and the book called God and Money, where the question was flipped upside down, and the premise of the book was, how much should you keep? In other words, every bit of this truly is God's, not just in theory. It is His. He owns it. It's not yours to do with as you please. Look at it all on the table and ask Him, how much of this should we keep for our family? And the rest is to be used for Him. And that just changed our whole perspective. So for me, we went from being, this is just language, but we went from being generous with what we thought was our resources to being good stewards of his resources and pulling out a portion for us based on what we felt he led us to keep. So it changed the whole paradigm of how we do money. So I don't think we're generous anymore. I think we're just being stewards of what he's put into our hands. And what's amazing is you see him put more and more into your hands when you truly are a good steward of it.
I love the way that you guys have been thinking about that. Those two questions, let's just mention them again, because they sound similar, but they lead you to very different conclusions. So the first question is,
how much do you give?
How much do you give? And
we make X, we've got these resources, we've got all sorts of opportunity. How much do we give out of this? What's good? And do you compare with the Joneses and the Robinsons, how much to give? But then the other question is, how much do you keep? Assuming all of it's his, how much is he leading us to keep for us?
Mm-hmm. Powerful.
Yeah.
So you guys come from very different money backgrounds. And that never creates issues in marriages, right?
Never.
When you have such different upbringings. Mm-hmm. Could you just talk a little bit about how your experiences with money y'all worked out in your marriage?
Even just in the very, very beginning and tithing and so forth, I was not accustomed to it. And so I knew you did, and I knew that would be something as a married couple that we would participate in. And so very early on, I was working in at a college for a catering company. Mm-hmm. And the church that we were attending was about to do a big church growth plan, building program. And in that, they asked if I would help with the catering side of things. And I don't think that we would have gotten as involved had I not been a part of it from the ground level. And in that, they challenged us to do more. And so from that, we were already tithing 10%. And so we said, okay, we're going to give a second 10%. And then they kept on and do more. And from that, we decided that we would give our tax refund. And so it was very small at the time. And so then the second year, the tax refund grew because we were now giving a second tithe and tax refund. And then the third year, it grew. And I grew. We had a child. And then we decided that we would move from South Carolina back to Georgia for financial reasons, because we were now getting ourselves into a bind because we were giving, and we were not.
Well, we moved originally from South Carolina back to Georgia to be closer to the businesses in LaGrange. Right. And that's when we found out we were having twins. And we had I overstepped in purchase of a home in Georgia. And
I love how he owned that.
Well, I did. It was definitely me. No. And we had a budget, but I was assuming more bonus income that didn't pan out, and so therefore we are going underwater. So our bills were about $1,000 a month more than our income, and we had given as a last effort toward this building program, we had given a portion of our savings. So now in Georgia, pregnant with twins, we're down to less than $1,000 in the savings account. But one point to this was, when we moved from South Carolina to Georgia, we left the church that we were doing the giving program with, the building.
You made this commitment to that church, and you're no longer
and
part
we're no
of it.
longer there. We're in Georgia now. But I asked my dad, she and I are talking about how do we continue with that commitment? And I didn't know the answer. So I went to Dad and said, what do you think? He said, I don't know what to tell you, but I'll ask you a question, and then you decide. Did you commit that giving to God or to the church itself? Were you looking to enjoy the fruit of the giving in the church, or was this just a God commitment and it didn't really matter? And we knew instantly it was to God. Yeah. So we kept giving back to South Carolina to this other program. We had a 3-year commitment we had jumped into, and we're a year and a half in. We're going underwater. We're giving it back. So when we moved from what was Noonan, Georgia to LaGrange, we downsized dramatically, because as soon as we found out we're having twins, we're like, all right, this is serious trouble.
Life's changing.
Yeah. So
3 kids under 2.
You got to tell the part about the twins and the pediatrician.
Well, we ended up in the pediatrician's office one day, and just the girls had reflux and they had to be on the special formula, and it was so expensive. And anyways, she said, let me see if I can make a phone call. And so next thing we know, a tractor trailer is backed up to our little house, and he's bringing a pallet of formula. And so that formula lasted and ran out the month that it was the last month of the giving campaign. And so God just totally worked that whole thing out for our benefit.
Gyra. God
There,
provides.
there
right?
were so many stories within that 3-year period. I think for the two of us, even though I grew up with the tithe and she did not, we both were cemented into the faith that God's going to take care of us. If we're obedient and we just give out of whatever he leads us to, he's going to take care of us.
Between the formula, all the different, just the twins itself, the formula, all the provisions, all the blessings that he was giving, then we're done with the campaign. And then the next year, the tax refund rolls around, and it was
It's like 5 times what it had
the
been.
original. So God was just so good in
Wow.
the blessings.
Let me press in a little bit more on that, Kim, because you guys are giving 20 or more % of your income. That's sacrificial.
Yes.
You're feeling it at that point. You're having to
Move.
you're having to move, downsize. You're having to ask for help, and the baby formula is showing up. So what is it like that you guys have maintained that level of sacrificial giving through some really crazy life situations? How do you do that?
It's hard not to when you see the blessing and you see, I mean, early on, Chris said, we can't outgive God. And from that point on, we can't.
When you've heard it said, but we're actually watching it happen. We're watching it get dumped on us at times when we can't handle it. And so there's one thing to hear it said, there's another just to live it, and see him continue to do it.
Yeah. Well, you've got great examples. Isn't it neat how you look back in hindsight and see God working?
So real.
Yeah, makes it, yeah. It gives you the strength and the confidence to take that next step
That's right.
in faith
Yeah.
when you reflect back. Well, I tend to see some clients overthink giving. They overcomplicate it. They just think too much about it.
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah, I remember that about your early days when we were talking. But so how have you guys learned to simplify the giving process?
Yeah, so I guess it's probably been three or 4 years ago. I had, income from the job I'm in with the nonprofit. I've got a small role at my boss's business, so I've got an income there, not substantial, but enough to be meaningful. And then I had some passive income coming out of a little bit of the business, the dealership business. And so several different areas, and I'm trying to do a spreadsheet, and I've got, percentage here, my tithe here.
Chris loves his spreadsheets.
Right. So at one point, I just had this epiphany. I'm looking at the passive income that's coming in, and I'm like, man, it's a little bit more than what we're giving now by adding all the different percentages up, but it's fairly close. It wouldn't be significantly difficult to stomach. So we just said, we're going to stop doing the percentages over here and just give that. That'll be our giving. So it's a little bit of an increase, not substantial. And literally within 60 days, the second or third month of doing that, 2 things changed with the structure of that passive income, and it tripled. Overnight, it tripled. And that's significant. And that to our income and to our lifestyle would have been a pretty significant change. Mm-hmm. But through this God and Money, through several things that we had looked at, one, we had this spending finish line, right? We said we're not going over X in any given year. So even if we make 10X, this is our spending limit. That's one thing. But the other is we committed to give that. So this is God's, right? Looking back to our church program, the second year of the tax refund, it was 3 or 4 times the first or the previous years, and we needed
the money.
But it was already committed. And once you commit it to God, I'm not brave enough. I do some brave things. I'm not brave enough to take that back. So for the last 3 years, we've been given that, and it's going from triple to quadruple, kind of bouncing around in that area. And so it's equivalent now to my income through the job I do. But it's his.
But we firmly believe because we committed it, that's the reason why it grew.
Yeah.
That's the numbers.
yeah,
I mean,
amen.
There's no doubt.
Yeah. Well, clearly generosity is so important to you as a couple, to you individually, to you as your family. How are you doing it? How are you encouraging that in your kids? You've got 3 kids. They're seeing you be generous. Talk to us about
Yeah,
how.
I'll talk about the younger, and she can talk about the older. But as kids, when they were 8, 9, 10 years old, maybe the girls were 7 or 8, and Nathan was 9 or 10. But we did Patrick Lencioni's 3 Questions for a Frantic Family, and it helped us to develop a mission statement for our family. And in that, we started a weekly meeting with the family, with the kids at lunch after church, right? So it was simple. Don't want it to sound too formalized, but we had a little notebook. We kept track of their chores. We gave them payment or wages for their chores. And out of that, as soon as we handed it out, we had these 3 banks. It was a store bank, a bank, and a church bank. And so we taught them to divide a third.
Save, spend, give.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So we did that for several years, and just ingraining in them, when I receive income, it's split. It's not all mine just to do with it what I want. Whether they choose to go to a 10% or they choose to do more than that in their giving, whatever it is, we just wanted that concept. So we kind of started early building that into them. And
we would pull that money together and take all the giving money out of all the bank and put it in a jar, and we called it the giving jar. And then we had different times children would come and say somebody didn't have a backpack at school, or somebody didn't have pencils, or different things like that. And we set parameters on it. We said the ways that we give, or the parameters that we put on giving, we kind of put it on that we didn't want to just give to anything. It needed to be faith-based, basically, or loving and helping others.
And we would secretly add to the jar too, right?
Don't tell all our secrets.
Yeah, I know. They're old enough now, they can hear it.
But then now, as they're older, it's like, what can we do? How can we help? And how can we still involve them in giving also? And from that they've become, we take a portion of money that we're going to give away every year, and we've asked them, what are organizations as adults now that are meaningful to you? And again, the same parameters, faith-based and so forth, that we've put on our giving still uphold for the organizations that they choose. And it's just been neat to see different places of where they want to give back, and but involving them also in the giving still today.
One of the things I hear from my kids as I'm trying to teach them that value of generosity is, I can't afford to give.
Sure.
How do you wrestle with that? How do you teach them they can? They can't afford not to give. How do you teach them that?
You model it. You talk about it. We're doing the giving jar, and we would say, Sunday lunch, we're starting that meeting. What did you guys see this week? You ask enough times, they start looking, and then they didn't even need to be asked. They'd say, hey, do you think we could buy a backpack out of this? That was then, it was still in their minds, it was their money. So they're training their brain to say, hey, this is how I do things. And, we've got 2 daughters and a son that are at very different levels of income, but still their heart is, I start with a default mindset that this is God's money, and I'm going to give out of that. And so you can't make them do anything. Now, you have a semblance of control at 8, 9, 10 years old. But at 20-something, you've lost control. It's just, you've launched them, and it's what's God put on their heart.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know legacy is so important to you guys. You're intentional. You're thinking about when you're gone, you want to make sure that what's left behind honors the values that you guys believe in. How are you thinking about legacy now?
One thing is, we're asking people that are older than us, how are they doing it, right? So we're always looking for couples that are 10, 15, 20 years ahead of us and saying, all right, what's coming, right? What do we need to be looking out for? And, we talked to a couple of different folks that said, I just don't know why I've been building up all this wealth to then give to my kids. I'm 75 years old and I can't enjoy watching them use it, and they're going to be gosh, they're going to be in their 60s when I go, and they really won't have as much use for it then as they could when they're younger. And so we just start picking up
That
cues.
just kind of struck.
Yeah.
a chord.
And then you said in one of our meetings, you said, Chris, you guys are doing so much outside of your family. Have you ever considered the fact that your family is and should be part of the beneficiaries of your giving?
That changed.
And that
us.
really
Did it?
Yeah, huge impact. So we started looking at how do we, rather than planning for a future date and give a huge inheritance, that if they're really young, it could wreck them. That if they're much older, they really aren't going to have as much use for it. How do we kind of meter it out over time, and also at specific points in their life when they need it, not to change their whole lifestyle, but to supplement what they're already trying to do and meet them there. And Kim came up with a great concept. Tell them about the savings.
Well,
thing.
based off of that, we ended up, nobody's married right now, and everybody's in, some are in relationships, so forth. They're possibly buying a house soon, so forth. And how can we help and come alongside? And so we did, last year was the first year, and we said, okay, if you save X amount, we'll match it. And then the next year, you still need to have that amount of money, and then save again, and we'll match it again. And so hold on to all of the money now, and on the third year, we'll double it. And so the whole idea was at the end that they've got some skin in the game where they've saved, and then we've matched, but yet they should be able to have a down payment or buy a ring or whatever their situation is, that and being able to enjoy it with them.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I'll often talk to clients about, why don't you do some of your giving while you're living so you're knowing where it's going.
That's
Yeah.
it. That's
You
it.
see it.
Yeah,
That's
and
good.
enjoy it. And some of that we've done a couple of trips where we've invited all three of the kids, but as well their significant other or whatever, and enjoy experiences with them out of our giving to show them time where they couldn't probably do it on their own at this stage in their career, but we also get to be a participant in it.
Well, I love your examples, practical examples about how you're encouraging your children to practice and ultimately bring into their lives how they can be generous.
If Scripture says it's better to give than receive, and you can prime the pump for the kids to see when they give what the response is and get blessed in that giving, then you're going to train their mindset to say, I want to do more of that because I see what God's doing in that. And then as they have their own to give, they'll be able to do that.
So you mentioned investing, this idea that I challenged you on. Invest in your children. Give them some of your giving, right? So that you can invest in the posterity, right? You're investing in them now. You guys have owned multiple RVs over the years, and I think I've seen those RVs. You have used the RV as an investment in the family. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I'll say that. It was several years ago. The girls were sophomores in high school. Our son was a senior, and it was frankly later than I wish it was, but I got the advice. One, you and your wife need to find hobbies that the two of you do together and enjoy together, because when your girls are gone, it's just the two of you, and you're not going to know each other if everything you do is centered around the kids.
Yeah, so true.
So that was one aspect of it, but also this idea of investing in time with them, and they're only going to be with you for another year, 2 or 3. So that's when we got the first camper. And I'll just say this, prior to that, I had always viewed, just being transparent, I had viewed big toys, big expensive toys, as just ridiculous. I didn't see where I could spend that kind of money on things, and I thought that was crazy. And then I realized somebody shared, again, wisdom with me that said, take the camper, for example. You invest in a camper. You're not going to keep the camper and use it for the next 20 years until it's worth 0. You're probably going to have it for a year or 2, then either realize you don't like camping or life changes and you'll sell it. So your real expense is the net between the two, right? So let's just say you're going to lose a third of that value over a 3-year period. Then in actuality, you spent that third on the experience over a 3-year period. And that, for me, is, gosh, it's life-changing, right? I can see the numbers there, and it makes perfect sense. And so we bought a camper at that point in time did it. When we moved to Spartanburg to do the nonprofit, had to give up the truck that was pulling it. So we had to sell the camper then. But shortly after COVID, we went back into a camper because we enjoyed it. And we have done that for several years. And now we're turning around and selling it to afford something else that is needed right now. So just the idea of buying and selling and taking the net difference that costs you as the expense. Yeah, it's a different mindset.
Yeah, I love that. It is one of our favorite all-time family trips where we rented an RV.
Yeah.
I was chicken. I didn't want to buy it yet.
Well, for one trip, I wouldn't recommend it. Yeah.
We rented an RV out west and went to Yellowstone. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
So what wonderful family memories. So.
Excellent.
It forces closeness, that's for sure.
It does. It does. Well, it has been a joy to come alongside you guys and just watch what God is doing in and through you, because your testimony has been an encouragement to me, encouragement to my team, and now I'm hopeful to be an encouragement to others, just about how you can walk out practically, step in faith around your money and trust that the Lord is right by your side, and will provide. So thank you for your wonderful testimony before and today. I'm grateful
Thank you for
you
your
guys.
help and your guidance as well.
Yes. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to the Wisdom for Wealth for Life podcast, brought to you by Blue Trust. Thanks so much for listening, and please subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcasts. Trust and investment management accounts and services offered by Blue Trust are not insured by the FDIC or any other federal government agency, are not deposits or other obligations of, nor guaranteed by any bank or bank affiliate, and are subject to investment risk, including possible loss of the principal amount invested. The information in these podcasts is provided for general educational purposes only. It is not intended as specific individual advice. The client's experience may not be representative of the experience of other clients, and they are also not indicative of future performance or success. Opinions expressed may not be those of Blue Trust.